Hey there, Rabanzo here. My guest for this episode is Ryan Kairalla, artist advocate, entertainment lawyer, and host of the Break the Business podcast. We talk about his book, Break the Business, Declaring Your Independence and Achieving True Success in the Music Industry, which includes chapters on why you don't want a record label, moving beyond the record label model, and the sectors of your indie music empire. Let's do it. This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I'm your host, Rabanzo. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. I want to say thanks to everyone who supports this podcast. The whole thing is intended to help independent musicians. Help them through a curation of expertise of other musicians and industry professionals. If you're loving the podcast, if you support the cause, visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the various ways that you can offer your support. And by the way, if you're a listener of the podcast, I consider you a supporter, especially if you share it with a friend. Again, that's unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn how you can get involved as a supporter. Have you heard of Bandzoogle? They power websites for musicians around the world, including Grammy winners. Their easy-to-use system will get you online fast. They have tons of mobile-friendly templates to help you customize your design and site content. It's built for musicians by musicians. Bandzoogle makes it easy to sell merch, grow your email list, integrate your socials, and they offer support from a musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Plans are affordable. Go to bandzoogle.com to start your 30-day free trial. Use the promo code Rabanzo to get 15% off your first year. Again, that's bandzoogle.com, promo code Rabanzo, R-O-B-O-N-Z-O. Ryan Kairalla is host of the Break the Business podcast, which provides advice for independent artists to help them move their careers forward, but with an entertainment law slant. Ryan was kind enough to recently host me as a guest on his Break the Business podcast. I had so much fun speaking with him then that I invited him to be a guest for this episode. His book, Break the Business, Declaring Your Independence and Achieving True Success in the Music Industry, is on my reading list. I recommend you add it to yours. Ryan and I also discuss why exactly he feels so strongly that you don't want a record label, why he got into entertainment law, the many ways live streaming is helping indie music artists, why podcasting is a great idea for indie music artists, and a whole lot more. Of course, here's me and Ryan Kairalla. Ryan, thank you for joining me for another episode of the Unstarving Musician podcast. I appreciate your time today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. I want to start out by asking you about your book, Break the Business, Declaring Your Independence and Achieving True Success in the Music Industry. It's got some great chapter titles in it. Let me just share those really quick for listeners and then let you talk about the book a little bit, what inspired you and wherever that takes you. Those chapters are, or the main parts are, why you don't want a record label, moving beyond the record label model, and the sectors of your indie music empire. Fantastic. Please tell me about the inspiration for it and anything else that comes to mind.
You bet. The book is a product of my own work in entertainment law. When I started practicing entertainment law in the earlier part of this decade, the cases that I would most often get coming in my door were indie musicians who would drop these 150-page documents on my desk saying, this is a record deal. The person who gave me this, the record label, says that it will change my life and all I have to do is sign it. Can you, lawyer, take a look at this and just let me know that it's okay, maybe mark up a few things here and there? And so I would review these documents, and inevitably every single one would just be a disaster, just an exploitative mess that would just ruin the life of any human being that was unfortunate enough to put their signature on it. And so I would tell artists, you can't sign this. And they would say, well, can't you make it better? And I would say, well, no, because you don't have any leverage. And this is a take it or leave it document. And maybe I can change a couple words here and there. But for the most part, this is the deal. And I would say, don't sign it. And then they would sign it because no one ever listens to their lawyer. And inevitably their life would get ruined. And I would go through this cycle several times, and it would just break my heart because I love musicians. I love indie artists. Anybody who listens to my podcast knows I love you guys. And so I just sort of came to this realization that there has to be a better way to do this. There has to be a clearer path to success for indie artists that doesn't involve getting your life ruined by record companies. Because I knew a lot about why contractually record deals were dangerous, but I didn't know what the alternatives were. And so I spent about a year interviewing independent musicians and basically just going to successful indie artists and being like, how have you been able to achieve success without a record deal? And it opened me up to this world where I got to interview a bunch of really terrific indie musicians who gave me lots of advice. And thus the Break the Business book was born. Half the book spells out why record deals are dangerous, goes through it section by section, written for non-lawyers, so there's not a bunch of scary lawyer words in there. And then the second half of the book is, once you've turned down that record deal, how do you achieve success on your own terms? How do you build your record creation, promotion, distribution, and fundraising to be able to achieve success while keeping yourself at the top of the pyramid? And I really enjoyed writing that book. I made a lot of enemies in the record label space, but I didn't really like those folks anyway, let's be real. And the book begat the podcast, and I've been on this ride ever since, and it's been really, really awesome.
And is it fair to say, I don't know, I'm kind of gathering this, learning more about labels through my own podcast, but is it fair to say that this applies to all labels, or is it a certain type of label? Is it just the major ones? Are there any scenarios like some of these more independent, smaller labels that generally are doing better things, perhaps some of the newer ones?
I like to tell people, and I've said this at panels before, and I've said this at talks and gotten lots of gasps along the way, but I say all the time, I have yet to read a record deal that I could advise a client to sign. And I've probably read over 500 of these things in various forms and versions. The record deals that I really get scared of, the ones that I talk about a lot in the Break the Business book, are usually either major label deals or these kind of weird hybrid management producer type deals. You know, the Kesha, Dr. Luke kind of deals where some producer is coming along, finds some young artist and says, sign this contract, I'm going to make you famous. And you're just giving everything away to somebody who's got no connections, no budget to promote you, and are really going to exploit you. Those are the ones that are particularly dangerous. Are there versions of record deals that are a little less frightening? Yeah, I think some of the independent record labels do it a little better, because the typical independent label deal tends to not be based on giving you a tiny royalty on every record sold, or a tiny piece of every stream that's already a pretty tiny piece, but really is based more on like, let's see all the money that comes in, let's deduct the costs, and we'll split it 50-50, 60-40, however you all decide to split it. And I do think that's more fundamentally fair. All of that being said, are there more fair and less fair label deals? Absolutely. Do I think there are label deals that exist that are better than the advantages that being truly independent provides? I'm not so sure about that. I think being able to own your masters, be able to do whatever you want with your work, true control of your destiny, have full control over when you create, with whom you create, and how you create, have a direct line between you and your fans, not have some gatekeeper in between. Those things are so valuable, particularly in the way that the music industry is going now, where authenticity and having a direct line to your fans is more important than ever. I think compared to all the scenarios, I'm still not convinced that there's something that's better than being a truly independent artist and being at the top of your own pyramid.
Sure. And based on what you've learned through your podcast and through practicing entertainment law, I have my own, my own opinions and thoughts on this, but what do you see as the best place to start for musicians that feel that a label is let's take the scenario of an indie label, a smaller one, but like they're the only way that they're going to get the help that they need to, because they just don't feel like they can do it all. They don't feel like they have the tools, or don't realize maybe that they do, just don't know what to do. So they lean on a label of some type to get some help to get their music out there. So my question is, in your opinion, where's the best place for musicians to start, indie artists to start, to take control of everything and be, as you say, in control of their own music empire?
There's never been a better time in the history of music to be an independent artist, because all the resources that you need to run your own music business, to create, promote, distribute on your own terms without having to go to somebody else to build those things for you, it's all online. And if you're savvy enough, it's all free. If it's about getting the information you need to learn how to I don't know, how do I put my music on a distribution service like a CD Baby or a TuneCore or a Sound Drop or something like that? How do I set up my publishing administration? How do I get a PRO? How do I set up live shows? How do I set up a booking agent? How do I get gigs? There are so many free resources out there between the podcast that you're putting together, my podcast, the countless other podcasts that exist, the blogs that are out there, Ari Hurston's blog, Ari's Take. There's so much information out there that anything you want to be able to learn how to do to run your own music empire, it exists and it's free. If you need a little more help beyond that, there's some great paid resources out there, courses you can take that a lot of great music industry people offer. And I'm happy to go through my own list of ones that I think are particularly solid. And if you need even more help than that, if you need like a person-to-person kind of relationship, there are a lot of folks that are like, well, I need a manager or somebody to give me advice. Well, you can get that advice without giving somebody 15% of your earnings as you do with a manager. Get a consultant. Get somebody who you pay a flat amount to, where you can sit down with them for a couple hours and talk shop and figure out your plans and structure the next year, 5 year, 10 years of your career. There's so many great resources out there that you don't have to give up your earnings, your copyrights, your life, your livelihood to get the things that you need. And so, yeah, that's where you start, is with the internet, with that information. Use the free resources and you can learn everything you need to learn to build that empire.
That's great. So what drew you to entertainment law to start with?
My love for musicians. I've always loved music, and I learned pretty early in my life that my life in music wasn't going to involve actually playing it. As anybody who has heard my guitar or ukulele or piano playing can attest, or heard me sing a song. But I always loved musicians. I was hung around musicians in school. We had a cool music program at my high school, and I was always hanging around musicians, always annoying them, always bugging them. And even when I was in high school, I was reading all those music business books, the Donald Passman book, for example, which is, I know, the Bible for everybody. And I would be giving artists advice even before I had a law degree or a high school diploma, for that matter. And I realized that where I found my passion was in helping creators be in a position where they could create most effectively, where they didn't have to worry as much about the business side because they were empowered to handle the business side. You know, not just me taking care of the problems for them, but empowering them to be a force to be reckoned with when they get to that negotiating table, and to be a trusted ally for them so that they could create amazing music without fear while having peace of mind. I got a lot of satisfaction out of that, even from a very young age. And so when I became a lawyer, it became all more easier for me to do that, because now I had this credential and I had this bar license that allowed me to really give great advice. And along the way, I think the thing I've enjoyed most is just getting to know new artists through the podcast or through my legal practice, just getting to meet so many artists, getting to hear so many stories, getting to hear the creative ways that artists out there are getting their art out into the world that are so different than what it was 20 years ago, where it was just, I need to get my music in Walmart. And now there's so many different ways, so many different revenue streams that exist for artists out there to make a living. And it's inspiring to hear their stories and to play even a small part on my end to help them make their dreams come true.
I feel the same. And certainly when I listen to your podcast, when I've spoken with you in the recent past and peruse your book, this passion that you talk about really oozes from every piece of content that you have out there. And certainly I'm sure it does in person too. So you would clearly be a wonderful person to work with on this front. I was going over the episode in which you hosted me as a guest on Breaking the Business. Thank you again for doing that. And one of the things that you mentioned that you really loved in our conversation there was you were really excited about in 2019 was live streaming shows. Do you see that, your excitement for that and what it's doing for artists continuing into the new year, since we're getting pretty close already to 2020?
I do think that is becoming the new frontier. Like video, you know, the Buggles famously said in the 80s when MTV launched that video killed the radio star. And then sometime around the 2000s, music video became less important because MTV started playing Teen Moms instead of music videos. And now video is back. And it's bigger than it's ever been, even bigger than it was back in the 80s when the Buggles proclaimed that the radio star was dead. Video is huge now on the internet, especially in the live streaming world. And for artists, it creates so many opportunities, particularly on the performance end. Because it used to be that touring was difficult, especially if you lived in an area where there wasn't a lot of live performance venues. Like, I live in Miami, Florida. Miami, Florida is a tough place to make a living as an acoustic musician because it's all EDM, it's all DJs here in Miami. And then there's certainly a large pocket for Latin music. If you're just somebody with you and your guitar, it's hard to find places to play in Miami. Except live streaming's changing all that, because now you have a worldwide audience where you can play gigs to anyone in the world, large audiences all over the world on platforms like Twitch, on platforms like Stage It and things like that. There's Facebook Live and Periscope and things like that. There's all these really cool platforms that exist to allow you to have a worldwide audience for your performances. You can put out tip jars and charge cover charges and things like that to make money off these performances. And it builds fan engagement. I've seen artists do incredible things in the live streaming space that really build fan engagement. One of my favorite indie artists, and anytime I interview anywhere, I always seem to sing her praises, is an artist named Mary Amber. That's Meriamber. She is the queen of the live streaming space in terms of what it can do for indie artists. She is doing something on the Twitch platform pretty much every day. And it's not just playing live shows, although she does do that. She also does songwriting sessions where she'll sit down there with a guitar, and her hundreds of fans are there on Twitch, and she writes a song in real time and even takes like lyric suggestions from her fans. So imagine getting to like contribute a lyric to your favorite artist's song, and now it's there forever, and you get that sort of immortality. And so she does that, and it builds fan engagement. It allows her to have a closer relationship with her fans. It's just using streaming video as a way to just build all these stronger connections that would have been impossible 20 years ago, especially if you lived in a place where there weren't a lot of live venues for yourself. So I think it's a really exciting development.
And I'm glad to hear that. And I, too, have seen the power of the fan collaboration. There's an artist I had in a way back episode who lives in the UK, Liz Crichton, and she is all about involving her fans in everything from songwriting process to choosing songs for her next release to what the release looks like in the packaging. It's very fun to watch and has really enabled her to start and sustain a music career and hardly only leave her home when she wants to. And she does that mostly to do things like be part of songwriting showcase competition type things and the occasional gigs. So I've seen that. And thanks for mentioning Twitch. I know little about it, and I was curious to know if Periscope is still doing a lot in the space. Of course, Facebook Live is kind of in my face, and Twitter, I guess because of the Periscope acquisition or relationship, has started doing some things with video as well. But I really didn't know much about Twitch, and just today I'm hearing about Stage It. So I look forward to checking those out as well as Mary Amber. So thanks for sharing her success story. One of the other things that we talked about when I was on your podcast was your recommendation to musicians or encouragement to get into podcasting themselves. I think it's a great idea. I've talked about it a little bit on mine, but I would love to hear why you think it's good for them and how you recommend they approach it and what some of your favorite resources are for them when they're starting out with a podcast.
I have been waiting. I've done so many podcasts, and I've been waiting for an interviewer to ask me this exact question because, oh my goodness, this has become like a real passion of mine, is to encourage more musicians to get into podcasting. And one of the reasons why is selfish. I just want to listen to more podcasts from musicians. The ones that I do listen to are really, really awesome. I can do a quick plug for, there's an artist named The Glass Child, Charlotte Erickson, who does a show called Behind the Glass. And her podcast is awesome because, first of all, she has this like really melodic voice. There's this like really great accent. And I love listening just to her. I would enjoy listening to her just read off her grocery list. But she goes into these like deep conversations about what her art means to her and where she is in her life. And then in every episode, she also sings a song. And it's amazing. And so I want more stuff like that. And so I think there's a real lane here for indie artists to get into podcasting and to leverage all the benefits it provides. One, I think the most obvious one is fan engagement. It's just another way to connect with your fans, for your fans to get to know who you are and what you're about and what are the things that you're interested in. And I think the other thing that podcasting offers, it offers this to artists, but it also offers it to people like you and me, Roberto, is networking. So there's this idea of that's this term that's been popularized called content networking, which is building relationships with people in your industry by creating content that involves them. And so let's say hypothetically, if I was an indie artist that was starting out and I didn't have any connections and I didn't know anything about the music business, I would probably want to start a podcast about how I'm an indie artist who's just starting out, who doesn't have any connections and doesn't know anything about the music business, and then invite on guests every week to help me build my connections. I'm going to have some executives from CD Baby on. I'm going to have some experts on crowdfunding on. I'm going to have the host of the Unstarving Musician podcast on, and they're going to teach me everything I need to know. And I'm going to build all these networking contacts from the comfort of my own home in my sweatpants. I don't have to go to a single cocktail party and pay for parking to do it. And I know if for the artists out there who are thinking, oh, I'm never going to be able to get these people on my podcast, you're wrong. All these people are so vain and they have Texas-sized egos, and everybody would want to come on your podcast. Like, I mean, the people I've been able to get on my podcast just blow me away because I'm not anybody, but people love talking about themselves and they love connecting with other people in the industry. And so if you start it up and you're persistent enough, you can get some really cool people on your podcast, and you build this great network, and you learn about the music business by all these experts essentially giving you information for free. Now, just to quickly touch on your last point about how to get started, there are a lot of great hosting platforms out there that allow you to set up your podcast pretty easily, pretty efficiently. I've heard some great things about Anchor as a podcast recording platform. In terms of setting up your actual podcast itself, in terms of hosting it somewhere, the two platforms that I'm biggest fan of for artists would be either SoundCloud, since as an artist, you probably already have a SoundCloud account. If you don't, maybe you should get on that. The other one that I really like is Spreaker. Spreaker is sort of up and coming now. And if you're going to host multiple podcasts on one network, Spreaker is really great with that. It's super affordable. It also comes with for another $99 a year, you can get a royalty-free music license through Spreaker, and you can put all this great music on your Spreaker account. So I really dig that one. I think Anchor has a pretty good hosting platform too. But there are enough resources out there where an artist can set this stuff up pretty quickly. And by the way, if you're already an artist that records their own music at home, as many artists do, you already have all the equipment you need to set up a podcast. So it seems like a pretty natural fit.
This is true, and a story I've told a few times is that I think different people who are starting a podcast belabor some question they have in their mind about whether they have the adequate gear, they have the adequate software, what host to choose. And my hang-up was, do I need to buy a mic? I have this great vocal mic I'm using now, I've been using forever. Its only downside is I got to be really close to it when I'm speaking into it, so I don't have one of these awesome looking radio type broadcaster type mics that a lot of podcasters do, but it works great. I finally, just went for it and learned that it sounded great. So as a musician, I guess to your point is that you already have everything you need. You have a laptop, probably has some software on it that if you want to do some editing, you certainly have access to things like Skype and Zoom, which are great platforms for doing what we're doing today. So yeah, that's great. And I'm glad I was the first, or at least it sounds like I was the first to ask you that question you've been dying to answer.
So much. Thank you. I wanted to get this off my chest. And look, artists, listen to me. If you're within the sound of my voice, if the only thing that's stopping you is just having somebody to talk to like walk you through the initial steps of this, email me. I will sit down with you for a half hour and we'll figure this out. And I'm no podcasting expert, but by the way, that's how easy this is. I don't have any audio engineering training. This isn't my forte, and yet I was able to set this up. So I know you can too, because you're probably much better with this stuff than I am.
Funny you say that. I was helping a friend who wants to get started with podcasting, and same listener, if you want to contact me, I'll do the same and share with you everything I've done and everything I've learned, all the fuck ups I've had in podcasting. But I was talking about you and one of my other podcasting friends, and I was like, I think Ryan Kairalla, did I say your name right?
You did, actually.
Yeah, I think you put it on your website. It's great the way you put the phonetic. I need to maybe do that for Robonzo too. But you seem to have the method down for recording it, and boom, it's ready to publish, which I don't really. And I don't know if that's true or not, but you are using some different types of gear, and you were talking about a new gear platform that you were considering. I think, is it called? I forget. It's Rodecaster? Was that
Rodecaster,
we were talking about, which is doing some really exciting things. I know a lot of podcasters are super excited about it. I may check it out at some point, but yes, you would be a great resource. I may follow up with you again to learn a little bit more about certain aspects that you're doing, because you seem really good at it. One of the most enjoyable things, well, there are two things I really enjoy about speaking with you, and I'm glad that we've gotten to do it a couple of times in the matter of weeks, but there are two things. The first one is you have a great voice for podcasting. you're great at articulating yourself, and you also have a real gift for, like you did something a few minutes ago. I asked you a three-parted question, and you tactfully went through all pieces. And I don't know, I was imagining maybe you're taking notes, which is really smart, or maybe you just recall that stuff really fast. Where did you acquire that? Was it college radio, or yeah, where did you acquire those skills?
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I think for me, I mean, I think most people would say, oh, he's a lawyer, so he must have learned these things in law school. I will tell you, I learned precious little of any useful skills in law school. Law school doesn't even teach you law. Like you learn the law that you need to learn to pass the bar exam after law school when you take some Barbary course for 6 weeks, because they don't teach you law in law school. They teach you like philosophy and justice and a bunch of nonsense. The most important class I've ever taken in my life, and I've taken AP classes and honors classes and all those nerd classes that you have to take when you're in high school and college. The most important class I've ever taken in my life, and probably the only class where I actually remember what I learned, is acting classes. I took drama when I was in high school, and even though I'm not anywhere close to being a professional actor and I don't, make any money in that space, the lessons that I learned there about presentation skills and self-confidence and just expressing yourself in an effective manner, those are skills I've carried with me throughout my life. And I did do college radio when I was in college, but really everything I learned from college radio was just, or everything I used in college radio was just, from my old drama class back when I was in middle school and high school. And maybe this is just, let me just get on my soapbox here and talk about this is why arts education is important. As school budgets are getting cut around the country, the first programs that usually get cut are arts, music, dance, musical instrument classes, drama classes, things like that, to focus more attention on reading, writing, and arithmetic. And to me, that's such a frightening prospect, because those arts classes are, for many people, even the ones who don't make a career in the performing arts, like me, are so much more important than a lot of the content subjects where you're going to forget that content within a couple years of you graduating anyway. I'm so thankful to the skills that I was taught in those arts classes when I was in middle school and high school that I still carry with me today. As you can see, I'm way too melodramatic on the microphone when I do interviews.
I don't know. I like it. It's you kind of have the radio voice thing going on, but again, there's this other facet of it. I have listened to myself. I had an editor at one time who was taking out every that I had in my speaking, and I learned very quickly that I say that I talk like William Shatner, because when I'm getting a thought out, I have these pauses that just me thinking. And then when I was listening to my episode with you, it's funny, I was laughing. I've listened to usually athletes, professional athletes, who use the words, a lot. And I was listening to myself, hey, I do it a fair amount as well, something new to work on. But yeah, I'm sure that those classes gave you a lot of help in working on those types of habits. The other thing I like about you, and this acting class thing is a case in point, is there are many things in the brief conversations we've had that I'm learning about through you. For instance, Twitch. You dropped an acronym on me, which maybe if we have time, you can tell me what it means. I was going to ask you, and I'm like, this PRO. I don't even know what that is. And you made me think about live streaming, which after we talked about it, I was listening to our conversation on your podcast, and I was listening to myself say, no, I haven't seen a lot of those, but realizing after you elaborated on a little bit that, oh yeah, I have seen some, but there's clearly a lot more going on than I realized. So that was new. And just what you said about acting classes, so great, because, the other option, which is a great one, are some great ones, or a couple of them, Toastmasters. So many people have learned these skills through something like Toastmasters. And then I know a wonderful, beautiful speaking coach. That's certainly an option, but it never dawned on me to look at something like acting classes. And I would even do it as an aging adult. I am now, but this is particularly interesting to me because I also listen to a couple of podcasts, one in particular hosted by Mark Maron, the WTF podcast, where he has a lot of entertainers on there. And by and large, most of them have done some sort of acting class, whether they're a stand-up comedian or they're an actor. And the things that come out of those conversations are very, very interesting to me. So it's something I can look into now. So thank you for that.
Well, you're very welcome. And so first of all, PRO, Performance Rights Organization, those are just the organizations that manage your public performance royalties, such as ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. Lots of artists will use those to sort of just, when your song's played on the radio or on streaming services, you get paid as a songwriter performance royalties, and those organizations collect them. So very, very valuable part of the music industry. I love me the PROs. Also, I think another route that a lot of artists can take in that space, where to sort of get better at speaking, not that I certainly have plenty of knows when I talk too, so don't worry, is improv classes. I've heard very good things about improv classes. And now for the artists out there who are listening and asking, how does this apply to me? Because these are just two podcasters talking about how to get better at podcasting. Why do I care about taking acting and improv classes? And I would say that even for the musicians out there, it's wildly important, because the line between who is a actor and who is a musician, it's blurring, especially when more and more artists these days are being broken on platforms like TikTok, which is like the new hot thing now for young people, these little 15, 30-second videos that artists are creating, where there are artists who are becoming very famous off this platform and are building music careers, especially the younger ones. And for every video that they're making where they're playing a song of theirs for like 15 minutes, they're doing comedy sketches, they're doing funny speeches, they're doing silly dances and things like that. And those are all different forms of the performing arts that are brought to bear in these videos just as much as their music is. So I like to tell artists that the music industry is shifting so much that musicians today are essentially just becoming influencers that happen to know how to carry a tune and play an instrument. And so all the same tools that any kind of Instagram influencer uses, those are the same tools that you need to use as an artist in terms of how to create interesting content beyond mere music and releasing records, making funny videos, doing interesting dances, whatever you're going to do to build fan engagement, build that brand and that authenticity. And so I could absolutely see how taking some improv classes, taking some public speaking classes can be a really important thing for an artist to do, to just build this overall content brand that you're trying to build as an artist.
Yeah, that's so true. I've seen over the years and years that I've been playing music, people that really catch my attention and talking about bandmates, and sometimes it's people that I've gone to watch perform in smaller venues where you can, be in proximity to them when you're, a musician who plays in the world that I do, is that their on-stage persona, from everything to kind of charisma that they are able to exude, to the way they sound on the microphone when they talk to the audience, and the things that they're able to communicate. And also for those venues like house concerts or smaller gigs, or even the big ones where you've got some sort of meet and greet, the advantages that you gain in your ability to network and be an entertainer off stage, someone that's enjoyable to talk to, and of course all the things that you bring to the online world that you just mentioned. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's definitely an advantage to, if you can be one of those artists that when you meet them after a show and they're signing something of yours, or you're just saying hi in like a meet and greet, if you have that special quality where you can look that fan in the eye and make them feel like they're the only person in the room, to have that kind of charisma, like that can make such a big difference over the long term for an artist in terms of building fan engagement. And I've seen the artists who can do that. And while there's something genetic about having that sort of quality, it's absolutely something that's learnable too, to be able to be comfortable in that face-to-face setting and just build a genuine connection in that brief moment where you're meeting that fan for the first time, or maybe for the 8th time, because that fan's like following you all over the country. It's really important that the whole public speaking and everything, as I can't even public speak at this right moment, but that stuff's really important. So I think Toastmasters and improv classes, acting classes, there's very much a space for that, I think, for artists.
Yeah, and for indie musicians who haven't considered it, why not put yourself out there as a public speaker? There are a gazillion artists who are up and coming that would love to hear what you have to share and what you've learned and things that you're probably able to teach others. So that's a good thing in so many ways. Let's wrap up, Brian, with a question about your courses. You mentioned them early in our conversation. I'd love to know and love for you to share with my listeners the types of courses that you have and then where they can most easily find them.
Well, for me, I don't work much in the course space. So there are a lot of folks out there in the music industry in our sort of sector who, do the podcasting, the books, and then offer the courses. And there are some great folks out there who are putting some courses together, and I absolutely recommend them. For me, I actually run a full-time legal practice where I work with musicians as well as other tech companies and education companies and nonprofits and different folks who either support the entertainment industry or the education industry. And so for me, the way I like to work with artists is in a one-on-one setting. I like to have clients who come into my legal practice, and I like to try in my legal practice to not only set up an artist's legal stuff, getting their corporations in place, getting their copyrights, trademarks in place, setting up their distribution and their publishing. But one of the other things that I try to value in my legal practice is I really take a holistic approach to my work with my clients. It's not just about treating your legal problem or getting your legal situation in a better place, but also I want you to leave the transaction with me with your career being in a better place. And so if I can just give you general music industry advice while you're my client, I'm happy to do it. If it's about introducing you to a good publicist or a good booking agent or a good consultant or anything like that, I'm happy to do that. And that's one of the great things I've enjoyed about doing this podcast is I've been able to build all these connections so that when a client needs somebody good for a particular service, I know exactly the person to connect them to. And I think I create a lot of value for clients that a lot of other attorneys can't do in that space. And I really, yet another reason why I've just really treasured the podcasting experience that I've been able to do for clients. And as for building a course, though, I might need to get on that because I keep having artists tell me that, like, oh, where do you have a course? I was like, just talk to me. I don't need a class, but I think it's high time. You might be right.
Well, I misunderstood, but it sounds like your courses now are the podcast and your consultations. And yes, I encourage you to create an actual course. Why not? People would probably love to get some things firsthand from you. And so the podcast, again, is called Breaking the Business. You can find it everywhere, anywhere that you listen to your favorite podcasts. And also you can learn more about what Ryan is doing at ryankairalla.com. And Kairalla is with a K, so it's Kairalla. And I will put it in the show notes so you can just click on it and go there and find multiple podcasts, at least 2 that you're working on, and more about who you are. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me for today's episode.
It's my pleasure. I really enjoyed this.
Hey, thanks again for listening. If you are loving the podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the various ways that you can offer your support. And again, if you're a listener, I consider you a supporter, especially if you shared it with a friend. Thank you. Have you heard of Bandzoogle? Yep, they're powering websites for musicians all over the world. Their easy system will get you online fast. They have tons of mobile-friendly templates to help you custom design your site and content. It's built for musicians by musicians. They make it easy to sell merch, grow your email list, integrate your socials, and they offer support from a musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Plans are affordable. Go to bandzoogle.com to start a free trial, and be sure to use the promo code Robonzo to get 15% off your first year. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code Robonzo, ROBONZO. Look for show notes and links to most everything mentioned in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening. With a whole lot of gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.